Send the widow home. Othofon said it with his back to her. He said it at the sorting table in the Marchbank wool house on the 22nd of March, 1882, in front of 30 shearers. A wool house is no place for her. She is not fit for it. Then he shortened it, the way men do. Unfit. Winnie Prather did not cry. She did not answer him either. She finished the fleece she had already opened. She rolled it. She tied it. Then she walked out through 30 men who had all found something else to look at. If you have ever done good work in a room that had already made up its mind about you, sit still with me a while. This one is for you. Hit subscribe if you want the rest of it. And drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from, because I would like to know how far this one travels tonight. Now, let's go back to Marchbank, Texas, the spring of 1882. Marchbank was 4 buildings and a wagon yard. There was the mercantile, that was Dorsey Sipes. There was the bank, which was 1 room with a stove in it. There was a church that was a school 5 days a week. And there was the wool house. The wool house was the only building in that country worth looking at twice. It was 90 feet long and sun-bleached gray, double doors at both ends, so a wagon could drive in one and out the other. Marion Coy had put it up in 1877 with borrowed money. He had been right to. That does not happen often. Everything in Tom Green County came through those doors once a year. Wool, sacks of it, bales of it, the whole of what that country was. You have to understand what wool was to those people. Otherwise, none of the rest of this makes sense. They were not cattlemen. A few of them wanted to be. Sheep were what the Concho country would carry, so sheep were what they ran. Once a year in the spring the shearers came through, and the whole year's living came off the backs of those animals in about 5 weeks. A man with 900 sheep took about 5,400 pounds of wool off them. At 16 cents a pound, that was $864. That was his year. That was the note, the flour, the leather, the taxes. The doctor, if there was one. All of it. One number, once in the spring. And the number was not his to set. There was one buyer. His name was Othofon. He was 46 years old. He came out of Boston by way of Galveston for a commission house called Sturgis & Co. He came in the 3rd week of March, and he left in the 2nd week of May. In between, he bought every pound of wool in that county. He bought it the way it came off the sheep, in the grease. Unsorted, run of the flock. One price for the good and the bad and the burry and the short, all in the same sack. That spring the price was 16 cents. It had been 16 the year before. It had been 15 the year before that. Nobody in Marchbank liked it. Nobody in Marchbank had a second buyer to take it to, either. That is a different thing from liking. Now Winnie Prather. She was 28 years old that spring. She was a big woman, broad through the shoulders, heavy in the arms, tall enough to look most men in the collar. Brown hair she pinned up every morning. It was down around her ears by 4 in the afternoon. She wore a blue wool work dress that had been a good dress in 1879. Over it a cream apron that was never clean. You cannot sort wool and stay clean. Anybody who tells you different has not done it. That is what Marchbank saw. Here is what Marchbank never bothered to find out. Winnie Prather had been in a wool house since she was 14 years old. Her mother took in sewing at Kerrville. There was no money in the house. In the spring of 1868, a man named Emil Roth hired her to sweep and to carry and to keep the tie boys moving. Roth ran the sorting floor at a warehouse there. That was the first season. By the 3rd season, he had her on the tables. She worked 9 seasons on those tables. 9 springs. 9 floors full of open fleeces. The middle of March to the end of May. 6 days a week. Standing up. Roth was a German out of the Rhine country. He had been a wool sorter before he was a warehouseman. He had come up in a trade where a sorter served 4 years before anybody let him touch a fleece he could ruin. He taught her the way he had been taught, slowly, without praise. He taught her that a fleece is not one thing, it is 6 or 7 things. They grew on the same animal. The whole art is knowing where one stops and the next begins. The shoulder is the best wool on a sheep, and always has been. The breech is the worst. The back is sunburnt and weak. The belly is dirty and short. The neck folds hold every burr that animal ever walked through. He taught her to read staple length by pulling a lock and laying it flat on the back of her hand. He taught her to count crimp. Crimp is the little wave in the fiber. The fineness of wool is in the crimp, and a sorter learns to see it the way a carpenter sees a plumb line. He taught her tender wool. Tender wool is wool where the animal was sick or hungry for a stretch. The fiber grew thin at that point. It will break there. You find it by taking a lock in both hands and snapping it against your thumbs and listening. Sound wool makes a note. Tender wool makes no note at all. It just goes. He taught her cotted wool, which is matted on the sheep and will not come apart. He taught her that black fiber in a white clip is worse than dirt. Dirt washes. Black does not. One black fleece in a white bale can take the whole bale down a grade. And he taught her the thing that mattered most. She did not understand it until her 5th season. The mill does not buy wool, Roth used to say. The mill buys certainty. She was 19 before she knew what that meant. A mill in Lawrence or Lowell buying 40 bales is not buying a substance. It is buying a promise about what will come out the other end of a machine. If the bale is honest and even, and every pound in it behaves the same way, the mill sets its machines once and runs. If the bale is a lie, the mill has to stop. Stopping costs more than the wool. So a mill will pay a great deal for a bale it can trust. It will pay almost nothing for a bale it cannot. And the whole distance between those two prices is one person's hands. That was the trade she learned. She was good at it by 17. She was better than Roth by 23. He told her so once in German when he had been drinking, and then never again. She married Elias Prather in the fall of 1876. She came out to Tom Green County with him because he had 160 acres on 6 Mile Draw and a notion about sheep. Elias Prather was 31 years old when he died. I want to be careful with him here. This story is going to be hard on him later. It should not be hard on him yet. He was a friendly man. That was the first thing about him, and the last thing about him. He liked people. He liked being liked. He was the kind of man who would stop his wagon 40 minutes for a stranger who was not in any real trouble. He ran their sheep, and he ran them decently. He also carried goods on the side for Dorsey Sipe. He rode out to the pens and the camps with samples in a case. There was cash in it. There was also everybody in the county to talk to, which he would have done for nothing. He was not a fool. He was not cruel. He was not lazy. He was a man who took a thing on faith when it came from somebody he liked. That is a very ordinary way to be. In this story, it cost 4 years and about $25,680. He died on the 9th of December, 1881. A norther came through. He was 11 miles out with the sheep, and he stayed with them, which was correct. He got wet doing it, which was not. He was in bed by the 2nd of December and gone by the 9th. The doctor came out from San Angelo and did what they did then, which was very little. Winnie buried him on the 11th. The ground was hard. 6 men helped. She was 27 years old. She had 160 acres. She had 900 sheep. And she had a note at the Marchbank bank for $412 that came due on the 1st of December, 1882. In the middle of January, she understood that she was carrying his child. She sat down on the step of her own kitchen when she worked it out. She sat there a while. Then she got up and went and counted the ewes. They were going to lamb in March. There was nothing else to be done about any of it. Here is where the money stood. 900 sheep in a good year cut 5,400 pounds. At Fane's 16 cents, that was $864. Out of it came the shearers, at 6 cents a head. That was $54. Out of it came sacks and twine and hauling. Out of it came the whole of her year. And out of it came $412 on the 1st of December. She could do it. It was tight and it was ugly and she could do it, as long as nothing went wrong. She was 27 and a widow and 4 months along. She already knew better than to plan on nothing going wrong. So she made a plan. It was not complicated and it was not new. She had watched Emil Roth make money out of it for 9 springs. She was going to sort, not just her own, anybody's. She would open every fleece and skirt it and grade it and put like with like. Then sell it in true grades instead of run of the flock. And she would do it for anybody in Tom Green County who would let her, at a half cent a pound, which was nothing. Because she knew what a sorted clip was worth, and Marchbank did not. Run of the flock. In the grease, that county got 16 cents. Sorted honestly into 3 grades and sold on its own merits. The top third of the same wool was worth 22 cents that same year to that same house. The middle was worth 18. The breech and the tags and the bury stuff was worth 9 or 10, and was worth exactly that, whether you sorted it or not. Do the arithmetic on 5,400 pounds. It comes out about 19.5 cents instead of 16. That is $189 on one small woman's clip. On 214,000 pounds, which is what Tom Green County took off its sheep in 1882, it is a good deal more than that. She went to Marion Coy on the 22nd of March and asked him for a table. Coy was 62. He owned the wool house. He took a fee on every pound that crossed his floor and had no interest at all in who owned the wool, so long as it came through his doors. He was not a cruel man. He was a tired one. A table, he said. 1 table. At the north end, out of the way. I will pay you rent on it. To do what? To sort. Coy looked at her a second. She watched him decide to be kind. She had learned to see that coming. Mrs. Prather, nobody in this county has sorted a fleece in 6 years. I know it. Fane buys run of the flock. I know that too. Then what are you sorting for? So that when he buys it, he is buying something he can put a number on, she said. Right now he is buying a sack with a rumor in it. Coy laughed. He did not mean it badly. That was the trouble with nearly everybody in this story, and I would like you to hold on to it. Almost nobody in Marchbank, Texas, was trying to do her harm. They were doing something much more ordinary. They were declining to think about her for more than 4 seconds at a stretch. I will tell you what, he said. Come see me in May. That was a no. She knew it was a no. She thanked him. Then she stood in the middle of that floor a minute anyway, and that was when she saw the fleeces. There were maybe 40 of them stacked by the west doors, come in that morning off a place south of town. They were tied wrong. The dirty side was out. And she could see from 15 feet away that somebody had thrown 2 or 3 black fleeces in with the white. She could not help it. She never could. She walked over and opened one. You open a fleece by putting it shorn side down on the slats and unrolling it. It comes open like a coat. Then you can see the whole animal at once. She opened it. She looked at it. She turned the breech back. She pulled a lock off the shoulder and laid it flat on the back of her hand. And that was when Othofane came in through the north doors, with Dorsey Saipe beside him and 30 shearers behind, and found a woman he did not know standing at the table with her hands in his wool. What is this? Somebody wrapped these dirty side out, she said. She did not look up. You will get docked 3 cents on the whole lot for that alone. And you will deserve it. There was a small silence in that building. Then Fane looked past her, at Coy, and said the thing this whole story hangs on. Send the widow home. A wool house is no place for her. She is not fit for it. And then, when nobody moved fast enough, unfit. Now, I want you to notice what he did not say. He did not say she was wrong. She was not wrong. Every shearer in that door knew she was not wrong. You cannot shear sheep for 15 years without learning what a bad rap does to a price. He did not say she was ignorant. He said she was unfit. That is a word about a person, not a word about a thing. That is what made it stick. If he had said she was mistaken, it would have been an argument. An argument has two ends. Unfit has one end. She rolled the fleece she had opened, the right way, dirty side in, and tied it. Then she picked her shawl off the slats and walked the whole length of that building. Out the south doors, into the light. She got up on the wagon seat. She drove 7 miles home. She did not cry then either. I am not going to tell you she was fine. She was not. She was 4 months on. She was 27 years old. She had a note coming due in December, and a man from Boston had just told a room full of her neighbors what she was in one word, and the room had agreed with him by saying nothing. But here is the part I have thought about most. By the time she had the mare unhitched, she had already gone back over it. Not the insult, the fleece. 3 cents docked for the wrap, and under that, in the wool itself, on the breech and down the neck, there had been something else. Little hard black flecks. Worked down into the fiber where a lock had been marked, she had rubbed one between her thumb and her finger. It had not crumbled the way a dirt clod crumbles. It had smeared. She stood in her own yard in the dark with her hand on the mare's neck. She rubbed her thumb and her finger together, and she thought, that is not dirt. She did not know yet what it was. She would know by the middle of June. Knowing it would cost her more than the word Fane used, and she would carry it alone for 5 months. The word got to town before she did. That is the way of it in a place with 4 buildings. By Saturday it was on the boardwalk. By the first week of April it had lost its sentence and kept its point, the way these things do. There was a new way of saying who she was, and it did not need her name in it at all. The unfit widow. Not the widow Prather. Not Elias's wife. Marchbank had a word for her now. It was one word. It was about her body and her condition and her sex all at once. And the beauty of it from the town side was that it did not require anybody to hold an opinion. It was just what she was called. She heard it herself for the first time on the 8th of April, outside the Mercantile, from a man she had fed at her own table. He did not lower his voice. That is the detail she remembered. He was not being sly about it. He had no more idea he was doing anything than a man has when he says it looks like rain. She went in and bought 40 pounds of flour and 6 pounds of coffee and put it on the book. She came out. She got up on the seat. She went home. 11 days after that, a lean, weathered man on a gray horse rode into her yard at 7 in the morning. He sat there without getting down. He watched her carry a sack of wool across 60 feet of dirt. His name was Ward Teague. He owned the Wine Glass, which was 5,200 sheep and about 900 cattle on 22 sections north of the Colorado. He had come 19 miles to find out whether a story he had heard in the wool house was true. He did not get down, and he did not call out, and he did not take his hat off. He sat the gray horse at the edge of her yard and let her finish what she was doing, which was walking a 60-pound sack of last year's tags across the dirt to the shed. She set it down. She straightened up. She put one hand in the small of her back, because that is what you do at 4 months, and then she took it away again, because she did not care to be watched doing it. "You will want the house," she said. "It is around the other side." "I do not want the house," the man said. "Then you are lost." "I am not lost either." He crossed his hands on the horn. You were the one that told Othophalm he was going to get docked 3 cents. I am. How did you know that from 15 feet away? Because the dirty side was out, she said. And every man in that building could have known it from 15 feet away, and 30 of them were standing there not knowing it. He looked at her for a while. My name is Ward Teague, he said. I run the Wineglass, north of the river. I know who you are. Everybody knows who you are. That is not always a compliment. No, she agreed. It is not. Ward Teague was 34 years old that spring. He had come up out of Bandera County with 2 brothers and no money in 1871, and by 1882 he had 22 sections, 5,200 sheep, and about 900 cattle, and the 2 brothers were both gone, one to Kansas and one into the ground. He was lean the way men got lean out there, which is not a thing you choose. Weathered dark to the hat line and pale above it. Broad felt hat gone the color of the road, leather vest, a work shirt that had been washed in creek water for 11 years. The thing about him you would have noticed first is that he did not talk while you were talking. Most men out there were waiting. He was listening. That sounds like a small distinction, and it is not. I have got 5,200 head to shear starting the 1st of May, he said. That is about 38,000 pounds of wool. It is 38,000 if your range was good and your ewes were fed. My range was good. Then it is 38,000. Fane will give me 16 cents for it. Fane will give everybody 16 cents for it, she said. That is the whole of what Fane does. That is $6,080. That is right. And what would you give me for it? She wiped her hands down the apron. She looked at him a long moment, because she had been in the county 6 years, and she knew that a question like that, from a man like that, is nearly always the front end of a joke. I do not buy wool, Mr. Teague. I sort it. I know what you do. I asked what it would come to. Sorted honest and consigned east on its own account, your top third at 22, your middle at 18, your breech and tags and burr wool at 9, and that is what it is worth on any day of any year, and no sorting on earth changes it. She did not have to think about the arithmetic. It comes out a shade over 19 cents on the whole clip. Call it $7,410. That is $1,330 more. It is $1,330 more, less freight and less the commission house. And you do not see $1 of it until October at the soonest. Fane pays you in May. That is the whole reason this county sells to Fane. It is not stupidity, it is May. Teague sat there. Say that again, he said. The part about May. A man with a note due in the fall cannot wait on Boston. He takes 16 cents in May, because 16 cents in May is money, and 19 cents in October is a letter. She shrugged. Fane knows it. It is not even dishonest. It is just what he knows. You have thought about this a good deal. I have thought about it for 6 years, she said, standing in a wool house with my mouth shut. He got down off the horse then. He did it slow, the way a man does when he has decided something and is not sure he likes it. Show me, he said. Here is what happened next, and I have gone back and forth about how much of it to give you, because it is the technical heart of this whole story, and I do not want to lose you in it. So I will give it to you the way she gave it to him. Plain, and out loud, and with her hands. He had 4 fleeces rolled in the bed of a wagon he had left down at the gate, come off 4 different places. He carried them up 2 at a time and put them on the plank table under the brush shed where she did her own work. Tell me what I have got, he said. She opened the first one. Off a weather, she said. 2 years. This came off your own range or off ground just like it. Why? Because there is no burr in it to speak of, and the tip is red with your dirt and not somebody else's. She pulled a lock, laid it on the back of her hand, and held it out so he could see the length of it against her skin. 3¼ inches. Good crimp, even from the shoulder to the thigh, which is the part that matters. That is a fine clothing wool, and Boston pays for it. And the next. She opened it and stopped almost at once. This one you will want to know about, she said. Give me your hands. My hands. Both of them. Hold this. She put the lock in his fingers, wrapped a turn around each thumb, and told him to pull it apart with a snap. He did. It went with no sound at all and no fight in it. That is tender wool, she said. That animal was sick or short of feed for about 3 weeks in the winter, and the fiber grew thin right there. It will break at that point in every machine it ever goes into. A mill finds 40 pounds of that in a bale, and the whole bale is suspect. You can hear it? You can hear it. Sound wool makes a little note when it goes. That made nothing. She took it back. That is 1/6 of the price gone, and no man alive can see it, and every man alive can feel it in 4 seconds if somebody once told him to try. Teague stood there, with his thumbs still up in the air where the lock had been. He said, "Nobody ever told me to try." "No," she said. "They did not tell me either. I was 15, and a man named Roth hit my hand with a stick until I did it right." The third fleece was cotted, matted through the middle, where the animal had been rained on and never dried. The fourth had black fiber down the neck, 20 or 30 hairs, nothing, and she picked them out one at a time with her fingernails and laid them on the plank in a little line like stitches. "That," she said, "is $18 off a bale of white wool, lying right there." Teague looked at the line of black hairs on the plank for a long time. "How long would it take you to do that to 38,000 pounds, he said. "With my own 2 hands and nobody else's? 14 weeks. And I would not get it done, because I am going to be no use to anybody for a stretch in November." "Then what do you want?" And this is the first of the 4 times in this story that a man tries to take the weight off her, and she will not let him, so I want you to watch it happen properly. "I will tell you what I want," she said. "But first you are going to make me an offer, because you have been working up to one since you got off that horse, and I would rather have it out here in the yard than in front of the bank." He had the grace to look caught. "You have a note at Marchbank," he said. $412 due the 1st of December. "I do. The wineglass keeps an account there. I would take that note up this week, and you could carry it to me at whatever you liked. Or not carry it at all. That would be between the 2 of us." "No, Mrs. Prather, I am not. No." She said again, and she said it easy, without heat. "The way you tell a man the gate is on the other side. Do you know what I would be, from the 1st of December on? I would be the widow Ward Teague paid for, and every pound of wool I ever graded after that would get looked at through that, including the pounds I graded right. Nobody would say that. Everybody would say that. They have already got a name for me, and I did not have to do anything at all to earn it." She put the fleece back together. "You cannot buy me out of this. You can hire me into it. Those are 2 different rooms, and I will only stand in one of them." He was quiet a bit. "All right," he said. "Then name it." "A 5th. "A 5th of what?" "Not of your clip. Of the improvement." She held up one finger. "Fane's price is 16 cents. That is the floor, and the floor is yours, all of it, whatever happens. Every cent I get you above 16, I take a 5th of, and you take the other 4. If I get you nothing above 16, I have worked 14 weeks for nothing, and that is my lookout and not yours." Teague did the arithmetic in his head, and I will do it with you, because it is worth seeing. 38,000 pounds. 3 and a fraction cents of improvement. Somewhere near 330 therlas. Her 5th of that was 266, which was $146 short of her note. "That is a poor bargain for you," he said. "It is an honest one for me. Nobody in Tom Green County can say I was carried. And if I say yes, then there are 3 conditions and none of them are money. Go on. 1. My hands only, on the sort. Your men can shear, and your men can carry, and your men can tramp the sacks. Nobody grades but me. The whole worth of a grade is that it is one person's judgment all the way through. 2 judgments in a clip is worse than no judgment at all. Done. 2-2. It goes east consigned. In my grades, in sacks marked by me. It does not go to Otho Fane. He whistled through his teeth. You want me to turn down a cash sale. I want you to turn down 16 cents on 38,000 pounds of wool that is not 16-cent wool. Yes, and 3? 3. She looked at him. If it goes wrong, you say out loud that it went wrong because you took a chance on a consignment, not because you took a chance on a woman. Because those will be the same event, Mr. Teague, and this county will only remember one of them. There was a silence in that yard. You have got that written down somewhere, he said. I have had it written in my head since the 22nd of March. Ward Teague put his hat back on. 14 weeks, he said, starting the 1st of May. A 5th over 16. Your grades, your sacks, my crew keeps its hands out of it. He put his hand out. And if it goes in the ditch, it goes in the ditch, because I sent Goodwill to Boston in a bad year. She shook his hand. Her hand was bigger than his, and both of them noticed, and neither of them said anything about it. He got up on the gray. Mrs. Prather, why did you say a 5th and not a 3rd? Because you would have said no to a 3rd, she said. And then I would be standing in this yard in October with 900 sheep and a name. He rode out. She stood there and watched him to the draw, and then she went and picked the sack of tags back up, and she was very careful about it, because she was 4 months on and there was nobody within 7 miles. Now I have to tell you about the crew, because it did not go smooth. And any version of this where it goes smooth is a lie. The Wineglass ran 11 men through the shearing. The man over them was Gid Rawls, who was 40 years old and had been with Teague since 1875, and was, on the whole, a decent man who had never once in his life had to think about this particular question. He heard about the arrangement on the 26th of April. You have hired her to do what, he said, to grade the clip. Ward, she is 4 months gone, and she is the size of a careful, Teague said. Rawls stopped. He was not a fool. I only mean the work, he said. It is 14 weeks standing up. It is 38,000 pounds. I have got 11 men, and every one of them is going to see her at that table and figure the boss has gone soft. They can figure it. They will say it in town. They can say it in town. And when they say it in town, Rawls said, they are going to say the other thing too, and you know what the other thing is. Teague looked at him. Say it then. They will say you have got a use for a widow that is not wool. The 2 of them stood in the horse pen a while. Gid, Teague said, you have known me 7 years. In that 7 years, how many times have I paid a man on account of what I thought of him? None. How many times have I paid a man for what came off the end of his hands? Every time. Then let it alone, Teague said, and count the sacks in July. That is not a triumph, and I am not going to dress it up as one. Rawls did let it alone. He also did not like it, and he did not stop not liking it until the 29th of August, and what changed his mind was not a speech. The shearing started at the Wineglass on the 1st of May. If you have never seen an 1880s shearing, you should understand that it is the loudest, dirtiest, fastest 5 weeks in a sheep country's year. Blade shearers, no machines, 11 men bent double from first light. A good hand did 90 sheep in a day, and the very best did 120 and cursed the whole time. There was a smell to it that got into your clothes for a month. Grease and lanolin and sheep and blood and hot dirt. The fleece comes off in one piece if the shearer is any good. A boy runs it to the table with his arms out full. It is thrown fleece out onto the slats, and it lands open, and it lands wrong, and somebody has to make it right. That somebody was Winnie Prather. They put her table at the north end of the shed where the light came in. It was 12 feet long and slatted, so the second cuts and the dirt fell through, which is the entire reason a sorting table is slatted. She had 6 wool boxes ranged around her in a half circle, and a barrel for tags, and a stick of blue marking chalk on a string at her wrist. On the 1st of May, she graded 411 fleeces. On the 2nd of May, she graded 480. By the 6th of May, the 11 shearers had stopped making the joke they had been making, because a man who is bent over a sheep for 11 hours develops a hard respect for anybody else who does not stand up either. By the 12th of May, Tobe Ansley had started running his fleeces to her table instead of dropping them at the door, because she had told him on the 2nd day that his shearing was the cleanest of the 11, and he had not been told a good thing about himself in a while. Tobe was 24. He was quick and thin, and he talked constantly. And on the 19th of May, Tobe Ansley put a fleece down in front of her, off a ewe that had come to the wineglass in a bunch bought that spring out of a place south of Marchbank, and said the word that started the second half of this story without having the first idea he was doing it. "Watch your hands on that one, ma'am," he said. "That one is tarred to the eyes." She had the fleece open before he finished the sentence, and she stood there looking down at it with both hands flat on the slats, and Tobe Ansley went on talking for another 20 seconds before he noticed she had stopped hearing him. "Ma'am? Say that word again." "Which word?" Tarred, he said. "Marked, you know. On the hip and across the shoulder. So a man can tell his own bunch at 400 yards when they are all mixed on the road." He wiped his forehead with his wrist. "Everybody does it. My daddy did it with a paint made out of. Ma'am, are you all right?" She was not all right, though it would be another 4 weeks before she could have told you why. There it was, plain as writing. A brand across the shoulder about the width of her hand, black and dry, and worked down into the wool clear to the skin. Around the edges of it the fiber was stiff and stuck together in little wicks. She took a lock of it between her thumb and finger and rubbed, and it did what the flecks in the wool house had done on the 22nd of March. It smeared. She got a knife and cut a piece out and put it in her apron pocket. Then she went back to work, because there were 480 fleeces coming that day, and a woman who stops in the middle of a shearing to think about something is a woman with 100 sheep backing up behind her. She graded until 7 that evening. She drove home in the dark. And that night she boiled a pot of water on her own stove and did the first honest test anybody in Tom Green County had done on the subject in 4 years. Here is what she did, and you can follow it in your own kitchen if you like. She took the marked lock, and she scoured it. That means hot water, and soap and thyme, which is more or less what a mill does at the front end of the whole process. Grease comes out of wool. That is the entire point of scouring, and it is why wool is sold in the grease and weighed in the grease and then loses a third of its weight when it is washed. Grease comes out. The black did not come out. She washed it 3 times. She washed it in water hot enough to hurt her hands. The soap went gray, and the water went brown, and the yolk and the sweat and the dirt of a year all came away like they were supposed to, and at the end of it she was holding a piece of clean, sound, 3-inch Texas wool with a stripe of black through it that was exactly as black as it had been when she started. She sat at her own table looking at it a long while. Then she said out loud to nobody, in her own empty kitchen, "Oh, Elias." She did not know yet. Understand that. On the 19th of May, 1882, Winnie Prather did not know one single thing about where that tar came from. And she said her husband's name anyway. And I have thought about that more than I have thought about almost anything else in this story. Some part of her had already done the arithmetic that the rest of her would need until the 21st of June to finish. Let me tell you what she was holding. Because it matters, and because almost nobody knows it now. Sheep have to be marked. That is not in question. A bunch on the open range gets mixed with 4 other bunches at a water hole, and somebody has to be able to sort them out again. In the old country, and in the older parts of this one, they used a rattle, which is a colored earth mixed up in grease or in oil. Red ochre mostly. It sits on the outside of the wool, it takes the weather badly, and it scours out clean in the mill. That was the whole reason to use it. It comes out. But rattle fades in 6 weeks of Texas sun, and a man out on the Concho who has just spent a day cutting his ewes out of somebody else's bunch will pay real money for a mark that lasts a year. Which brings us to pitch. Pine tar and lampblack, thinned with a little oil, sold in a 2-gallon bucket. It goes on with a paddle. It does not fade, it does not wash off in the rain, it does not blur. In 1878, a bucket of it would mark 300 sheep and cost 40 cents, and against a rattle that had to be redone twice a year, it looked like the plainest bargain in the world. And it will not scour out of wool, not with hot water, not with soap, not with anything a Massachusetts mill was willing to put in a bath in 1882. The tarred locks go through the whole works and come out the far end still black. They will not take dye. A worsted goods dyed a light shade with tarred fiber in it comes off the machine speckled, and the whole piece is a second, and a second is worth maybe half. So the mills learn to look for it. And when a mill learns to look for something in wool from a particular place, it does not write a letter to that place. It does not send a man out to explain. It simply pays less, forever, quietly, to everybody. She tried to tell somebody on the 24th of May. I want that on the record, because there is a version of this where she sat on it out of pride, and that version is false. She drove into Marchbank with a scoured lock in a fold of paper in her apron, and she put it on Marion Coy's counter. Look at that. At what? At the black. Coy looked at it. He turned it over with one finger. It is dirty. It is washed, she said, 3 times, in boiling water with soap, by me, on my own stove. That is what a mill does. Everything else came out. That did not. So it is a dirty piece of wool. It is a marked piece of wool. That is pitch. Coy straightened up. Mrs. Prather, ask me what pitch does in a scouring bowl. I have got 40 wagons coming. Ask me. I am not going to ask you, Coy said, because I know what comes next. You are going to tell me there is something wrong with the way this county has marked its sheep for 5 years, and I have got 40 wagons coming. That is not an answer. No, he agreed. It is a wagon yard. She stood there with the paper open on his counter. Marion, how long have I been in this county? 6 years. And in 6 years, have you ever known me to be wrong about a fleece? He was quiet a second. He was an honest man, and it was an honest question. No, he said. Then take it seriously for 4 minutes. I would, said Marion Coy, if it was anybody else that brought it in. And that is the whole of it right there, said out loud by a man who did not mean it cruelly, and did not know he had said anything at all. She folded the paper back up. She put it in her apron. She did not raise her voice, and she did not argue, because 9 seasons in a wool house teaches you when a floor is closed. She went home, and she thought about it for 19 days. Now hold that, because we are going to come back to it, and let me put the other half of that spring in front of you first. In the last week of May, Marchbank found out she was carrying. She had known since January and had told 2 people, and there was no third person, and it did not matter, because a woman who is 5 months on is not carrying a secret anymore. She was at the mercantile on the 27th of May with 40 pounds of flour to get onto the wagon, and Ada Sip came out from behind the counter to help her lift it, and that was that. Ada Sipe was 50, and she was kind, and I do not want you to hear this next part wrong. You should not be out at that shearing, Ada said. Not now. I am well enough. Winnie, sit down a minute. I have got 22 sacks to get to the wool house before dark. Then let one of the men, there are no men, Winnie said. There is one woman, and she is going to be out at that shearing, because there is $412 due at that bank on the 1st of December, and it is not going to pay itself out of anybody's kindness. Ada Sip stood there with her hands in her apron. She meant well. She had meant well her whole life, and she was going to go on meaning well right through the middle of August, when her meaning well cost Winnie Prather more than Otho Fine's word ever did. People are talking, she said. People are always talking. They are saying it is not right. A woman in your condition out in a shearing shed with 11 men. And what do they say I should do instead? Ada did not have an answer to that, because there was not one. That is the thing about a town's advice. It is always very clear about what a woman should stop doing, and it is never once, in the whole history of the world, been clear about what she should do at 6 in the morning instead. So Marchbank added the second half of her name that week. Not just the unfit widow now. Now it had a reason attached, and the reason was her body. And a body is a wonderful thing to build a verdict on, because everybody can see it, and nobody has to look at anything else. She heard 4 versions of it before the middle of June. That she was after Teague, that Teague was keeping her, that she had lost her mind with grief, that she was going to lose the child out in that shed, and it would serve everybody right. She graded 480 fleeces a day through the whole of it. On the 9th of June, the wineglass shearing finished. 38,000 pounds of wool off 5,200 sheep, opened one at a time by one pair of hands, and put into 6 grades and 74 sacks, every sack marked in blue chalk on the shoulder, with a letter and a number that meant something. And on the 12th of June, Winnie Prather walked into Dorsey Sipe's mercantile and bought a 2-gallon bucket of sheep marking composition for 40 cents. You are marking late, Sipe said. I am not marking anything. Then what do you want it for? I want to know what is in it. Dorsey Sipe was 55, and he had run that counter for 14 years. And he was neither a crook nor a fool. He was a storekeeper. A storekeeper's whole trade is knowing what people will buy and getting it in front of them, and there is nothing wrong with that trade. And I want to be fair to him, because the story is not fair to him later. Pitch, he said. Pine tar and black, and a little oil. It says so on the paper. Where does it come from? Out of a jobbing house in Galveston. How long have you carried it? Sipe thought. Since 78, he said. Somebody talked me into it. She stood very still. Who? She said. And Dorsey Sipe, who had not connected 2 thoughts in that direction in 4 years, and who did not connect them then, and who answered the way a man answers, when he is reaching for a ledger and thinking about something else entirely, said the thing that ended the first half of Winnie Prather's year. Why, your husband did. There is a particular quiet that comes over a person when a thing they have been circling for a month sits down in front of them. She did not fall over. She did not go white and grip the counter. Those are the things people put in stories. What she did was ask 2 more questions in a level voice, both of them useful, because she had 9 seasons of standing next to men who would stop telling you things the moment you gave them a reason to. Did he sell it, or did he only recommend it? Sold it. He carried it out to the pens for me for 2 seasons. 78 and 79. Sipe was still looking for the ledger. Elias could sell anything. He believed in the stuff. Told everybody it would save them a day's work twice a year, and it did too how much of it went out of this store. Now he did look up. What is this about, Mrs. Prather? How much? I would have to count it. Then count it, she said, and I will pay you for the hour. He counted it. It took him until the middle of the afternoon, and it cost her 50 cents, and it was the best money she ever spent in that building. Between the spring of 1878 and the spring of 1882, Dorsey Sipa's Mercantile had sold 611 buckets of pitch-marking composition into Tom Green County. 611 buckets, at 300 sheep a bucket, near enough. That is every sheep in that country, marked over and over again, year after year, by every grower in it. Not a few, not the careless ones, all of them. She walked out of the store into the light and stood on the boardwalk with her hand on a post. Across the road, the wool house doors were open, and there were 6 wagons in the yard. And the whole county's living was going in through those doors at 16 cents a pound, the way it had gone in at 16 cents a pound the year before, and 15 the year before that. And she understood, standing on a plank walk in a town of 4 buildings, exactly why. There was one more thing she had to check, and it took her 9 days to get it. And she got it out of Marion Coy in the end for the price of a pie and 40 minutes of being underestimated. Coy kept his own book. Every warehouseman did. In it were the weights that crossed his floor, the fees he took, and because Sturgis & Co. sent him a copy so he could settle up, the sale accounts that came back from Boston. She asked to see 4 years of them. He said no. She asked again on the 21st of June with the pie in her hands, and said she was only interested in the freight, and he sighed and put the book on the counter and went out back to see about a wagon. She was not interested in the freight. Down the right-hand side of every account, in the same clerk's hand, year after year, was a note against the Tom Green consignments. She copied it out onto the back of a flour bill in pencil, and she got it word for word, and I have seen the words she wrote. Tom Green Co., Texas, pitch-marked, allow 3C, 1879, 1880, 1881, allow 3C, allow 3C, allow 3C, 3 cents a pound. On 214,000 pounds a year, that is $6,420 a year, out of the pockets of about 60 families every year for 4 years, and not one of them knew the reason, and every one of them had been told it was the range, or the breed, or the burrs, or the drought, or Texas wool generally, or just the way the market was. $25,680. That is what Tom Green County had paid, in 4 years, for a mark that would not wash out. She stood at that counter with a pencil in her hand and the whole thing laid out in front of her, and she was 28 years old and 6 months along, and she had in her possession the single most valuable piece of information anybody in that county had held in a decade. And she could not say one word of it out loud, because the very first question, before anybody asked what tar was, or what scouring did, or what a mill paid, the first question out of the mouth of every man in Marchbank was going to be the same. Where did the tar come from? And the answer to that question was a friendly man on a good horse with a sample case, riding out to 61 shearing pens between 1878 and 1880, telling the whole of Tom Green County that he had found them something cheap that would not wash off in the rain. The answer was Elias. His sample case was in the trunk at the foot of the bed. It had been there since the 11th of December. She had not opened it. There had been no reason to. There had been every reason not to. She opened it on the night of the 21st of June, 1882, and she went through it by lamp on the kitchen table, and it took her until 2 in the morning. It was all in there. A friendly man keeps everything. Cards from a jobbing house in Galveston. A folded price list. 3 little tin lids with samples of the composition dried on them, one of which he had used as an ashtray. And a black order book, 5 inches by 8, with a strap around it, in which Elias Prather had written down every call he made for Dorsey's site between the spring of 1878 and the fall of 1880. 61 pens. She counted them twice. 61 places in Tom Green County, listed by the owner's name and the water they ran on, with the date beside each one and the number of buckets left there. And on the inside of the front cover, in his hand underlined twice, the line he must have said 61 times out loud, "Will not wash off in the rain." She read it, and she put her hand flat over it. And she sat in her own kitchen for a long time, with her hand on her husband's handwriting. Let me put this in front of you the way it sat in front of her, because this is the middle of the story and everything after it turns on it. Winnie Prather now knew 4 things that nobody else in Tom Green County had put together. She knew the county's wool was docked 3 cents a pound. She knew the dock was for pitch. She knew the pitch came out of Dorsey Sipe's store, 611 buckets of it. And she knew the man who had carried it out to 61 shearing pens and told every one of them it was a bargain. Any 3 of those facts, said out loud in the wool house, would have made her the most useful person in that county overnight. All 4 of them, said out loud, would have made her the widow who stood up in public and blamed her husband. And there is no way to say the first 3 without the 4th. That is the trap, and it has no door in it. Try the sentence yourself. Say, our wool is docked 3 cents for the pitch marking. The next words out of any mouth in that room are, where did the pitch come from? And there are 61 men in that county with the answer written in their own tally books, in a friendly man's handwriting, with the date on it. She tried it out loud in her kitchen. I know that she did because she told Teague so later in almost those words. She stood up at her own table at 2 in the morning, 6 months on, with the lamp guttering, and she said it to the wall the way she would have to say it to a room. The pitch is costing us 3 cents a pound. And then she stood there and waited, and in the silence she heard the room say it back. Who brought us the pitch, Mrs. Prather? She put the order book back in the case, and the case back in the trunk, and went to bed and did not sleep. Now here is what she did for the next 3 weeks, and it is the least dramatic and most human thing in this entire account. Nothing. She did nothing at all. She hauled her own clip in. She graded 26 fleeces a day for 2 growers south of the draw who paid her an eggs and a half day's work. She wrote a letter to a commission house in Boston that was not Sturgis & Co., and got no answer to it. She let the middle of the summer go by with $25,680 of her neighbor's money sitting in her apron pocket in pencil on the back of a flour bill, and every one of those days the county went on calling her the unfit widow, and she went on letting it, because the price of stopping it was her husband's name. I am not going to pretend that is a triumph either. It was not. It was a woman choosing, day after day, in full knowledge, and it cost people who had nothing to do with it. On the 14th of July she went into the wool house to collect for a sort she had done, and Othophon was at the desk with his coat off. He looked up. He knew who she was, and he had the decency to look like a man who wished the last 4 months had gone otherwise. Mrs. Prather, Mr. Fane, I am told you have graded 38,000 pounds of Ward Teague's clip into 6 grades. You are told right. He will not sell it to me. No, she said. He will not. Fane put his pen down. You should know it will not work, he said. Consignment is a young man's game. You will pay freight to Galveston and freight to Boston, and a commission in storage, and you will wait until October. And you will land 18.5 where I would have handed him 16 in May. You have done that arithmetic quick. I do that arithmetic 40 times a year. Then do this one, she said. Do 3 cents a pound on 214,000 pounds. And Othophon, who was 46 years old and had bought wool in 9 states, sat perfectly still. Where did you get that number, he said. Off the back of a flour bill in Marion Coy's book. Allow 3 cents. It is written on every Tom Green account since 1879 in the same clerk's hand. You had no business in that book. No, she agreed. Are you going to tell me it is wrong? He did not answer for a while, and when he did the one thing she had not expected, which was to tell her the truth. It is not wrong, he said. I have a standing instruction from Sturgis & Co. Buy Tom Green County 3 under the Concho standard on account of pitch, and do not enter into correspondence about it. Do not enter into correspondence about it, she repeated. That is the wording. Say what that means in English. It means, Fane said, do not tell them. She stood there in that gray building with the dust hanging in the light. 4 years, she said. 4 years. 60 families. About that. And you have sat in this house every spring since '79 and shaken hands with men whose money you were holding out of, and gone to supper at their tables. Yes, why? And here is where this story gets harder than the version you were expecting. Because Othofon did not give her a villain's answer. He gave her a bookkeeper's answer, which is worse. Because it is not a lie, Mrs. Prather, it is a price. The wool is worth 3 cents less, and I pay 3 cents less, and if I explained it, half of them would quit the pitch, and the other half would say I was a Yankee looking for a discount, and I would spend a year arguing with 60 men about chemistry. He picked his pen back up. And because my house does not pay me to improve Texas. You could have told one man. One, any one of 60. Fane looked at her over the desk. I did, he said. Everything in Winnie Prather went cold and still. When? The fall of '79. At Sipe's counter, with 4 or 5 men standing around the stove. I said the pitch was costing this county money in Boston, and they would be better off with a rattle. He said it flat. There was no cruelty in it, and that made it worse. And a fellow standing there laughed at me, in a perfectly friendly way, and said a mark a man can read at 400 yards is worth 3 cents of anybody's money. And the others agreed with him, because they liked him. And I let it go, because I was one man in a store in a country that had already made up its mind, and because it was not my 3 cents. She did not have to ask. She asked anyway, because there are things you have to hear said. What was his name? You know his name, Fane said. She went out through the south doors. She got up on the wagon. She drove 7 miles home. This is the only place in the whole of 1882 where I am fairly sure she cried. There was nobody there to see it. She never mentioned it to anybody. Ward Teague came out to 6 Mile Draw on the evening of the 16th of July with a wagon of oak posts. He did not need to deliver himself. She was on the step. The light was going. He put the team up without being asked, and came and stood in the yard with his hat in his hand. You have not been at the wool house in 2 days. No, Gid Rawls says you have got 22 sacks graded and sitting. I have. He waited. He was good at that. Say it, he said, or do not, and I will haul the posts and go. So she said it. All of it. In order. The black flecks on the 22nd of March. The scoured lock, the 611 buckets, the order book, the 61 pens, the line about the rain, Othofon's standing instruction. She said it in a level voice from beginning to end. It took about 11 minutes. Ward Teague sat down on the edge of her step when she was 4 minutes into it, and did not say a word until she was finished. Then he said, $25,680. $25,680. Out of this county. Out of about 60 families in 4 years. And you have had it since the 21st of June. I have had it since the 21st of June. Why have you not said it? And this is the part I promised you. This is the shameful true thing, and she said it out loud to another human being exactly once in her life, on a step in a dark yard in July. Because I am the unfit widow, she said. That is what they call me. And I can carry that, because it is not true, and a thing that is not true wears out eventually if you outlive it. Go on. But if I stand up in that wool house and tell them why they are poor, then by dark it is not my name anymore. It is his, and his is true. She had her hands flat on her knees. For 4 years, every man in this county has liked Elias Prather. He is the fellow who would stop his wagon for you. That is what he is still to 61 families, and he cannot come back and be anything else. He is finished being anything. All he can be now is what people say. Winnie, and I would rather the whole of Tom Green County stayed poor, she said, than have them say his name the way they say mine. There was a long quiet in that yard. That is a terrible thing to want, she said. I know it is. I have known it every day since the 21st of June. I have stood in Sipe's store and watched Ada put a bucket of that pitch in a man's wagon and said nothing, and I have gone home and I have not slept, and I have wanted it anyway. Ward Teague turned his hat around in his hands a couple of times. All right, he said. That is all you have got to say to that? No, he said. But it is what I have got to say first. Then he made his offer, and it was the second time, and it was gentler than the first, and she refused it just as flat. Come to the wine glass, he said. There is a house at the North Camp that has been empty 2 years. You would take $60 a month to run my wool from now until the spring, and I have got 4 women out there, and a cook and a man that can drive you into town whenever you like. And you can let the whole of this alone. Let the county have its 16 cents. It is not yours to fix, and you are 6 months on, and I am tired of watching you carry sacks. She thought about it. I want to be honest with you. She thought about it for a good while, and she was not made of stone, and $60 a month was better money than any woman in that county was earning. No, she said. Tell me why, and I will not ask again. Because on the 1st of December I want to walk into that bank, she said, and put $412 on that counter, and have every soul in Marchbank know that it came off the end of my own hands. Not out of your account. Not out of anybody's kindness. Off a trade I learned at 14 years old from a German who hit me with a stick. And the tar? The tar is not going anywhere, she said. It has been in every fleece in this county for 4 years. Then what do you mean to do about it? And Winnie Prather said the sentence that turns this whole story around, and it is not a brave sentence and it is not a clever one. It is the sentence of somebody who has thought about a thing until there is only one road left. I am not going to tell them anything, she said. I am going to show them a number. He looked up at her. Say more. A man does not believe in explanation. He believes in invoice. She held up one finger, the way she had in April. I cannot say why we are poor without saying his name, so I will not say why. I will take 4 bales east on consignment, in my grades, with the pitch pulled out of them by hand. And I will let a mill in Massachusetts write the number down on its own paper, in its own hand, and mail it back here. They will still ask why. They will ask the paper, she said. And the paper will say a price, and a price does not have anybody's husband in it. Ward Teague sat on that step and looked out at the dark for a minute. 4 bales, he said. 4 bales, out of your clip, because it is the only clip in this county that is already sorted. 2 of them sorted and picked clean of pitch, and 2 of them run of the flock, exactly the way Fane buys, off the same sheep on the same day. You want to send a bad one on purpose. I want a control, she said. Roth taught me that in 1871, and I have never had the chance to use it. If I send only good wool, they will say Boston was in a fine mood in October. If I send both, off the same range, on the same wagon, the difference is not an opinion. It is subtraction. He started to laugh, and then he did not. How much will the 2 bad ones cost me? About $70, she said, and I will take it off my 5th. You will not. I will, and it is not for discussion, and if you argue I will put it in writing and mail it to you." She got up off the step, which took her a moment, and he had the sense not to help. "Mr. Teague, in October a piece of paper is going to come back to Marion Coy's wool house from a house in Boston addressed to you, and every grower in this county is going to read it, and not one line of it is going to have my name on it, or his." "And what is on it?" "Two numbers," she said, 9 cents apart. The 4 bales took her 19 days. "I want to give you those 19 days properly, because everything that happens in November is bought with them, and because this is the part of a working life that never makes it into a story. 2 bales sorted and picked, 2 bales run of the flock, same range, same 400 sheep, same week in May. The 2 run of the flock bales took her a day and a half. You do not do anything to them. That is the point of them. You put the wool in the press the way a shearing shed puts it in the press, good and bad and burry and short all together, and you tramp it down and you tie it and you weigh it, and you are finished. The other 2 took her the rest of the 19 days. She worked in the east shed at the wool house, which Coy rented her for $2 the month because it had a bad roof and he could not use it for anything. She had her 12-foot slatted table, and 4 boxes, and a stool she almost never sat on. She started at 6, and she quit when the light went. Picking pitch out of a fleece is done exactly one way. There is no other way, and there never has been. You find the mark. You take the tarred locks between your fingers, down at the base, and you pull them out, and you drop them in the tag barrel. Then you go around the edge of the mark, where the tar has wicked into the wool that is not black yet, and you pull that too, because a locked-up wick of it will go through a scouring bowl and come out the other side and ruin a bale that cost you 3 weeks. A shoulder brand the width of a hand costs about 6 ounces of good wool to take out. 6 ounces. Times 400 sheep. That is 150 pounds of the best wool on the animal, gone in the tag barrel, and 19 days of a woman's hands, and the whole reason for it is a 40-cent bucket that saved a man 1 day of work twice a year. Her hands cracked open across the knuckles in the 2nd week. Tar is not kind, and neither is 11 hours of grease and dust. And she wrapped them at night in a rag with mutton fat on it, and had them open again by 10 the next morning. She was 6 months on when she started, and 7 when she finished. Tobe Ansley came in on the 4th day and stood in the door. "Mr. Rawls says I am not to help you." "Mr. Rawls is right. It is my grade or it is nobody's. He did not say anything about the barrel." "What barrel?" "That one," Tobe said. "The one you are going to have to carry out to the wagon every 2 hours for 19 days. She looked at him. "Carry the barrel," she said. He carried the barrel. For 19 days he carried the barrel, and he never once touched a fleece, and I have always thought that boy understood the whole business better than anybody else in the county, including some who were 40 years older. On the 1st of August, Dorsey Sipe closed her book. He did it politely, and he did it in the middle of the store, with 3 people in it, which is the way those things get done in a town of 4 buildings. "Mrs. Prather, I am going to have to ask you to settle up and go to cash. I owe you $31.40. "That is right." "Have I ever been late?" "No." "Have I ever asked you to carry me over a season?" "No." "Then say the real reason," she said, in front of these people, "and I will pay you and go." Sipe's ears went red. He was not built for this. He was a storekeeper, and he had a wife and a stove, and 14 years of doing what the county did. "There is talk," he said, "about your arrangement out at the Wineglass. There is. And there is talk about you going into Marion Coy's book." "Ah," she said. "And a store cannot be in the middle of a thing like that." "No," Winnie said. "A store cannot." She paid him $31.40 out of a knotted handkerchief, in coin, and she counted it onto the counter one piece at a time in front of everybody, and she thanked him, and she walked out. It took her 4 minutes, and it cost her the only credit in 22 miles. For the rest of that year, she bought flour with money she had in her hand, or she did without. And then, on the 12th of August, Ada Saipe did the kindest thing anybody did to her in 1882, and I want you to watch what a kindness can do. There was a subscription raised at the church. Ada started it. She went around after the service with a list and a pencil, and by the end of the week she had $95 written down against 23 names. And on the 14th, she drove out to 6 Mile Draw with the list and the money in an envelope. "It is for you," she said. "For the winter, and for after. Nobody is asking you for anything." Winnie looked at the envelope on her own table. "Who signed it?" 23 of us. "Read me the names." "Winnie." "Read them." "Ada, read them." And on that list, at number 9, was the name of a man who had told 4 people in the wagon yard in June that a woman who would not stay home in her condition had no business complaining about what she got called. And at number 14 was the name of a man who had laughed in the wool house on the 22nd of March. And at number 3 was Dorsey Sipe, who had closed her book 13 days earlier. Winnie Prather sat there with her hands in her lap. "Ada," she said, "what is this money for? For you?" "No, say it exactly. What did you say to them when you asked?" Ada Saipe went quiet, because she was an honest woman, and an honest woman knows when she has been asked a real question. "I said, the widow is in a bad way, and it is not her fault." "There it is," Winnie said. It is not her fault." Winnie turned the envelope around on the table with one finger. "Ada, in 4 months not one of those 23 people has asked me a single question about wool. Not one. They have asked about my health, and they have asked about my condition, and 2 of them have asked whether Ward Teague is paying me in something other than money. I never, I know it." She pushed the envelope back. "But this is $95 to keep me quiet in the only way a town knows how. It buys them out of the trouble of ever finding out that I know more about the thing that keeps them poor than every man in that church put together." Ada Saipe looked at her for a long moment. "That is not what it is," she said. "Then it will still be $95 in December," said Winnie, "and I will come and ask you for it. And you will see how fast the list gets shorter." She did not take it. Ada drove back to town with the envelope on the seat, and she cried on the way, and she told her husband that night that the widow Prather was the proudest woman in Texas and would learn better. And on the 1st of December, when the subscription had quietly become 11 names and $38, Ada Saipe found out that Winnie had been right, and it was the beginning of her turning into somebody worth knowing. The 4 bales went out on the 5th of August. 2,040 pounds, on a contract freight wagon, 92 miles north to the railhead at Abilene, at $1.10 the hundredweight. That is $22.44 to Abilene, and rail freight from there to Boston on top of it, and the commission house 3% on the far end. She paid the wagon freight herself in coin because she would not have it on Teague's account. On the sorted bales she chalked her marks on the shoulder of each one, the way Roth had taught her, the grade, the count, and the date. On the 2 unsorted ones she chalked nothing at all except the words "run of flock," and under that, in the same blue chalk, the only editorial comment she ever put on a bale in her life: "A.S. taken." "What does that mean?" said the freighter. "It means nobody touched it," she said. "Which is the whole idea." The bales left Marchbank at 6 in the morning. She stood in the wagon yard and watched them go north until they were a smudge, and Ward Teague sat his gray horse 30 feet away and watched them too. And neither of them said anything, because there was nothing to say for 8 weeks. Then came the 29th of August. It had rained on the 27th and the 28th, ordinary rain, and everybody was glad of it. On the evening of the 29th, the sky went the color of a bruise off the northwest, and a squall came in over the Concho, with hail in the front of it, and it hit Marchbank at 20 minutes past 9 at night. Marion Coy's east shed was 60 feet long, with a shingle roof he had been meaning to see to since 1880. In that shed, on the night of the 29th of August, 1882, sat 74 sacks of Ward Teague's graded wool and 18 sacks of Winnie Prather's, and the whole of it was worth better than $7,000, and about 40 feet of the roof came off it in the first 6 minutes. Winnie was in town. That is luck, and I will not dress it up as anything else. She had come in that afternoon with a load, and had stayed over at the Widow Call's rather than drive 7 miles at night, and she was on the porch of that house when she heard the noise. She got to the wool house yard in 4 minutes. Coy was already there with a lantern, standing in the rain, doing what a 62-year-old man does when 30 years of work is coming apart in front of him, which is nothing at all. "Marion, it is gone," he said. "It is all gone. It is coming in on the north half. It is not gone. Where is the town? What? Where is the town? Marion, ring the bell." He rang the bell, and Marchbank, Texas, came out into a hailstorm at 9:30 at night, because a bell at that hour means fire, and there is not a soul in a wooden town who will stay in bed for it. 61 people came. I have counted them off the list Coy wrote out afterward, and it is 61, and 19 of them were women. And they stood in that yard in the rain, and looked at a shed with no roof on the north half, and did not know what to do, because nobody in that county had ever been told the first thing about wet wool. Winnie Prather got up on a barrel by the door. "Listen to me," she said. They did not, at first. There were 3 men shouting about the roof, and somebody wanted a ladder, and 2 more were carrying a sack out into the rain, which was the exact wrong thing. "Put that sack down." That got them. "Now hear me," she said. "Wool that is wet is not ruined. Wool that is wet and stacked is ruined. Do you understand the difference? A wet sack in a pile heats. It heats from the inside, and it goes yellow, and it cots, and by Thursday it is worth 8 cents instead of 22, and if it is packed tight enough, it will scorch itself brown in the middle without any fire in this county at all." Somebody said, "How do you know that?" "Because I have opened a heated bale," she said, "and you have not. Do you want to argue? Or do you want to save $7,000 of Ward Teague's money?" That settled it. It settled it because it named a number and a man, and because she had gone up on the barrel instead of standing in the crowd. She ran that yard for 3 hours and 40 minutes, and she did not come down off the barrel once. Here is what she had them do, and every bit of it was right. The dry sacks came out first, from the south end, and went across the road into the church, which was the only building in town with a sound roof and a floor. 49 sacks. A chain of people, 22 of them, hand to hand in the hail. The wet sacks did not get stacked anywhere. They got cut open. She had them cut the twine and turn the wool out loose on the church floor and on tarpaulins in the wagon yard under the shed overhang, spread no more than 8 inches deep, and she called the depth out about 40 times that night. 8 inches. Not a foot. 8 inches or it heats, grade by grade. She would not let them mix. Any other woman in Texas would have said save it and sort it later, and later would have been 2 weeks of work she did not have. So she stood on that barrel in the rain at 7.5 months and read the blue chalk on every sack that went by her, out loud, and called where it went. That one is 3. Church. Back wall. Left of the stove. That is a breech sack. It can lie in the yard. It will not get worse. No, look at the mark. That is 1. That is the best wool in this county. That goes inside where it is dry, and if you drop it in that mud, I will have your name off Marion's list. Gid Rawls got there at 11, with 4 wineglass men, having ridden 19 miles in the dark. He came into that yard expecting to take charge of it. He was the foreman of the biggest outfit in the county, and it was his boss's wool. What he found was 61 people working in a line, in the rain, at the direction of a woman standing on a barrel, with her hair down her back and a lantern hung on a nail beside her head, and not one of them arguing. He stood there about 90 seconds. Then he took his hat off, in the rain, which is a thing a man does not do, and he went and got in the line, and he passed sacks hand to hand with everybody else for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes, and said nothing at all. At 10 minutes past 1 in the morning, the last sack came out. They saved 92 sacks out of 92. 2 of them were badly wet, both of them number 4 wool, and she wrote them down as a loss on the spot and told Coy to write them down too. The rest was spread 8 inches deep on a church floor and under a wagon shed, and it dried over the next 4 days. And when it went into the press in September, it graded exactly what it had graded in June. Not a pound lost. Not a grade lost. At about 2 in the morning, when it was over, and people were standing around under the shed overhang wringing out their sleeves, Gid Rawls came and stood in front of the barrel she was finally sitting on. "Ma'am, Mr. Rawls, in May I told Ward Teague he had hired you because he had gone soft." "I know you did," she said. "Tobe told me in June. He absorbed that. I have been in wool 20 years, he said. I did not know that about the heating. Not the 8 inches, not any of it." "No," she said. "Nobody told you to try." Gid Rawls nodded slowly, and then he did the thing that mattered, which was not an apology, because an apology is words. "There is 4 growers south of the river that I know of," he said, "that have not sold their 82 clip yet. They are holding it in their own sheds, hoping Fane comes back through in the fall." He put his hat on. "I will ride down there Thursday and tell them what I saw here tonight. And I will tell them what it costs to have you look at it." "Half a cent a pound," she said. "That is too cheap. It is what I said in April." "Then charge it," Rawls said, "and put my name down first, because I have got 300 head of my own out there, and I have been marking them with Sipe's pitch since 1879. Gid Rawls rode south on the Thursday, and that is where the second half of Winnie Prather's year started, in a way she had not planned and did not control. He came back with 4 names. By the 12th of September there were 9. By the 1st of October there were 17. Not one of them came because they had changed their mind about her. I want to be plain about that, because the version where a town wakes up one morning with a new heart is a story for people who have never lived in one. They came because Gid Rawls had 20 years in wool and had stood in a yard in the rain and seen something. 17 growers with unsold 1882 clips brought them into the east shed at Marchbank at a half cent a pound. Between the 7th of September and the 20th of October she opened, skirted, picked and graded 41,000 pounds of other people's wool with her own 2 hands. That is $205 in fees. It is also 41,000 pounds of the most educational wool anybody in Texas ever handled, because it came off 17 different places, and every single sack of it had pitch in it. Every one. 17 out of 17. She kept a book. Of course she did. Grade, weight, owner, and a column at the right-hand side headed pitch, in which she wrote down the ounces she pulled out of every clip and dropped in the tag barrel. By the 20th of October that column added up to 611 pounds. 611 pounds of good wool in a barrel off 17 places in 6 weeks. She did not miss the number. She sat and looked at it for a while, 611 buckets and 611 pounds, and then she wrote underneath it, in the same pencil, a bucket a pound. And she left it there without another word, because she had learned by then that a fact will sit and wait for you. The wineglass clip went north on the 18th of September, 70 sacks pressed into 38 bales at Coy's, hauled 92 miles to the railhead at Abilene in 6 wagons over 5 days, consigned east to a commission house in Boston that was not Sturgis & Co. Marion Coy weighed every bale across his own beam and wrote out the manifest, and beside each bale, in his own hand, he put her grade mark. That was Coy's idea, and nobody asked him for it. "You are putting a woman's grades on your manifest," Fane said to him. "I am putting the grades that are on the sacks," Coy said. "It is a warehouse, Otho. I write down what is in front of me." Which is about as close as Marion Coy ever came in his life to taking a side. Now let me bring in the last man in this story, because he arrives on the 4th of October, and he is the hardest one. Reuben Prather was Elias's brother. He was 38, he ran a place over in Menard County, and he had come 60 miles in a buggy with his wife's shawl folded on the seat beside him for the return trip, which tells you he had thought about this. He sat at Winnie's table and turned his cup around 4 times before he said it. "I will give you $600 for the place. It is worth $430. I know what it is worth." "Then why $600? "Because it is the 4th of October, Reuben said, "and you are 8 months along, and you have a note for $412 due on the 1st of December, and I do not want my brother's wife in that bank on that day." He looked up. "Take the $600. Clear the note. Come to Menard with us until the spring. There is a room." And this is the 4th time, and it was the hardest of the 4, because it did not come from a rich man being generous or a town being kind. It came from family, and it came from grief, and Reuben Prather's hands were shaking around that cup. "Reuben," she said, "look at me and answer me honest. Why do you want me out of Tom Green County?" "I have said why. You have said part of why." He put the cup down. "They are saying things about him," he said. There it was. "Who is?" "Fellows at Menard. It has got 60 miles already. That there is something wrong with this county's wool, and the widow Prather knows what it is." His jaw worked. "And when a thing like that comes out, Winnie, somebody has got to have brought it in." And Elias carried a sample case for Dorsey Sip for 2 years, and there is not a pen in this county he did not sit down in. "Yes," she said, "you know. I have known since the 21st of June. Reuben Prather put both hands flat on her table. "Then for the love of God let it alone," he said. "He is a year gone. He cannot answer it. He was the best-liked man on this river, and that is all he has got left, and it is all I have got left of him. And if you pull that thread in front of 60 men in that wool house, he is not the fellow who stopped his wagon for you anymore. He is the man who ruined this county for 40 cents a bucket. Forever, that is what he will be at every supper table for 30 years. She sat there with her hands on her belly and let him say it, all of it, because he had driven 60 miles to say it, and because every word of it was true. "I am not going to take your $600, she said. "Winnie, and I am not going to promise you what you came for either." She said it quietly. "I have carried it since June, and I have not said it to a living soul but one. And I do not know yet what I am going to do in November, and I will not lie to you in my own kitchen to make you feel better on the road home." He wept a little, the way a hard man does, in about 4 seconds, and then stopped. "He believed in that stuff," he said. "You know he did. He came to me in '79 with a bucket of it in the buggy like it was a Christmas present. I know. He was not a crook. Reuben, there is nobody left alive who knows that better than me." He drove back to Menard with the shawl still folded on the seat. The paper from Boston came into Marion Coy's wool house on the 14th of October, 1882, in the afternoon mail, in a long envelope with a printed corner card on it. Winnie was not there. She was 7 miles out with 900 sheep and a man come to look at her wethers. Coy opened it because it was addressed to the house, and Coy, who had spent 4 months carefully not taking a side, read it standing at his own counter, and then walked out into the yard with it in his hand, and read it again in the light, and then went back in and put it on the counter, and set a weight on the corner of it, and did not move it for 3 days. By supper time, 20 men had read it. By Monday the 16th, the whole county had. Here is what it said. I have the wording because a copy of it went into Coy's book and stayed there. 4 bales, ex-Tom Green County, Texas, consigned by W. Teague, sold at auction the 6th of October. Bale 1, marked fine clothing, picked 3-inch and better, sound, even, free of pitch. Weight 512 pounds, sold at 24 cents. Bale 2, marked medium, picked, weight 508 pounds, sold at 19.5 cents. Bale 3, marked run of flock, A.S. taken, weight 511 pounds, sold at 15 cents. Bale 4, marked run of flock, A.S. taken, weight 509 pounds, sold at 15 cents. And then, at the bottom, in the buyer's hand, in the ordinary language of a man writing a note about the day's work, 11 words that went through Tom Green County like a fire through grass. Bales 3 and 4 pitch marked throughout. Allow 3 cents customary Texas. 24 cents and 15 cents. Off the same 400 sheep. Off the same range. Off the same week in May. 9 cents apart on 1 sheet of paper, in a stranger's handwriting, 2,000 miles away, with no argument attached to it, and nobody's name in it at all. Allow 3 cents customary. Customary, that word did more work in Marchbank than anything anybody said out loud that autumn. Because customary means it has been happening a while. And every man who read it did the same sum in his own head at his own table, and the sum was the same for all of them. 3 cents. On my clip. Every year. Since when? Marion Coy did not have to answer that. His book was on the counter, and it had been on the counter since the 21st of June, and by the 18th of October he had had 14 men in to look at it. And every one of them had run a finger down the right-hand column and found it in the same clerk's hand. Allow 3C. Allow 3C. Allow 3C. 1879, 1880, 1881. On the 19th of October, 6 growers signed a paper asking Marion Coy to call a meeting of everybody in the county who ran sheep. He set it for the 14th of November at the wool house because that was after the fall work and before the freezing. And on the 24th of October, Otho Fane came out to 6 Mile Draw. He came in a hired buggy, alone, and he did not get down, and it was the only time in his life he ever went to a Texas grower's house instead of the other way around. Mrs. Prather, Mr. Fane, you will have heard about the meeting. I have. Coy has asked me to attend. My house wishes me to attend. He had his gloves in one hand. I will be asked questions in that room. You will. I am going to answer them, Fane said. All of them. Truthfully, I have thought about it for a week, and I am not going to sit in front of 60 men who have been shorted for 4 years and shade anything. She stood in her own yard and looked up at him. Say the question you mean. Somebody in that room is going to ask me how long I have known, he said, and I will tell them since 1879. And then somebody is going to ask me why I did not say so, and I will tell them what I told you. That I said it once, at Sipe's counter, in the fall of 79, in front of 4 or 5 men. And then somebody will ask who was standing there. Yes, said Otho Fane. and I will not lie about it. I am a buyer, and my name is on 4 years of this. The only thing I have left to be is exact." There was a good long silence in that yard. "You did not have to drive out here and tell me that," she said. "No, why did you?" Fane looked out over her draw for a moment, at 900 sheep on a gray October hillside, and he was a long way from Boston, and I do not think he had liked any of it for some years. "Because in 9 states," he said, "you are the only person who ever opened a fleece in front of me and told me something I did not know. And because you have got 3 weeks to decide how that room hears his name, and it will go better for you if you are the one that says it." Then he put his gloves on and turned the buggy around and drove back to Marchbank. She stood in the yard until she could not hear the wheels. 3 weeks. I want to lay out for you exactly what she was holding on the 24th of October, 1882, because it is not simple, and every road out of it cost her something. She could stay home. The meeting would happen without her. Fane would answer questions honestly. Elias's name would come out of a Boston buyer's mouth in front of 120 people, and she would hear about it on the 15th from somebody on a boardwalk. That was the coward's road, and it was also, in a way, the cleanest, because nobody could say she had done it. She could go and say nothing, and hope the room stopped at the store and never got to the sample case. She could let Dorsey Sipe take it, and Sipe would have. He had ordered the stuff, his name was on the jobbing house invoices, and it would have been true in every particular to say the pitch came into this county over Dorsey Sipe's counter. It would have been true, and it would have been a lie in the shape of a truth, and Ada Sipe would have paid for it for 20 years. Or she could stand up in a building where a man had called her unfit on the 22nd of March in front of everybody she knew, 8 months along, and say her husband's name out loud herself. She did not decide for 19 days. She graded wool. She had 6 more clips come in that month. She got her own 18 sacks pressed and away north on the 3rd of November. She slept badly, and she ate standing up, and she went on being, in the mouth of that county, the unfit widow, right through the whole of it, because a name does not come off, because a piece of paper came in from Boston. On the 9th of November, Ward Teague came out with a wagon and a load of firewood she had not ordered. He stacked it. Then he stood in the yard with his hat in his hands, the way he did. "You have not asked me what I think," he said. "No. Are you going to?" "No," said Winnie, "because you will tell me to say it, and you will be right, and I do not want to do the hardest thing in my life because a man told me to." Ward Teague thought about that. "All right," he said. "Then I will tell you something else instead, and you can do what you like with it." "Go on." "In 1879 I bought 40 buckets of that pitch off Dorsey Sipe," he said. "Elias Prather did not sell them to me. I sent a boy in for them, because I had heard from 3 men on the river that it was cheaper than rattle and it would not wash off in the rain. I have marked every sheep on the wineglass with it every year since, 5,200 head." He turned the hat around. "And I have got 4 buckets of it in my shed right now." She looked at him. "Winnie," he said, "there is not a man coming to that meeting who does not have a bucket of it in his shed. Whatever else is true, that is true, and it will still be true on the 14th of November." He got up on the wagon. "One more thing, and then I will let it alone." He gathered the lines. "In April you told me that if this went in the ditch, I was to stand up and say it went in the ditch, because I sent good wool to Boston in a bad year. Because those 2 things would be the same event, and this county would only remember one of them. I remember." "It did not go in the ditch," Ward Teague said. "So there is a room full of men on the 14th of November that is about to remember one of 2 things, and I am not going to tell you which one to give them. But I will tell you that you are the only person in Tom Green County who gets to choose." She decided on the night of the 13th of November. She decided it sitting on her own kitchen floor, with her husband's order book open on her knees. By then, she could not get down onto a floor and back up again without planning it first. She wanted to be on the floor. She read all 61 entries, every pen, every date, every name. Then she read the line on the inside of the cover for the last time, "Will not wash off in the rain." Well, she said to it, "No, it will not." And she put the book in her apron pocket and went to bed. And she slept about 4 hours, which was more than she had slept in a week. The 14th of November, 1882, was a clear, cold Tuesday with a north wind on it. There were 34 wagons in the yard at Marchbank by 9 in the morning. 22 of them had wool on them. Half that county had held its clip back out of the fall sale, hoping something would change. Something had. They opened both sets of doors, and it was still not enough. There were 120 men in the wool house, and better than 30 women, and people standing in both doorways, and boys up on the press frame with their legs hanging down. Marion Coy stood on a bale at the north end. He had never chaired anything in his life. Otho Fane sat at the desk with his hat on his knee. Winnie Prather came in at 20 minutes past 9 and stood at the back by the south doors where the light was, and 4 men moved out of her way without being asked, and not one of them looked at her. Coy read the Boston sheet out loud. He read it slowly and badly, the way a man reads a document he is frightened of, and when he got to the last line, the whole building went quiet in a way that buildings do not usually go. Bales 3 and 4 pitch, marked throughout. Allow 3 cents customary Texas. Read that again, somebody said. He read it again. 24 cents, said a man near the front. And 15, that is what it says. Off the same sheep. Off the same 400 sheep, in the same week, on the same wagon, Coy said. It is all on the one manifest. It is in my book, and any man here can come and read it. Then a grower named Hollis Purdy, who ran 1,400 head on the North Prong and was 63 years old, stood up in the 3rd row and turned around and addressed the desk instead of the bale. "Mr. Fane, Mr. Purdy, how long have you known about that 3 cents? And Otho Fane stood up and put his hat on the desk and told 120 men the truth, and I have thought for a long time about how much easier his life would have been if he had not. Since the spring of 1879, he said. The noise that went up in that building lasted the better part of a minute. I have a standing instruction from Sturgis and Co., Fawn said, when it dropped enough to talk over. Buy Tom Green County 3 cents under the Concho standard on account of pitch, and do not enter into correspondence about it. That is the wording. I have carried it out every spring for 4 years. You have sat at my table, a man shouted. I have. You shook my hand in May. I did. And you knew. I knew, said Otho Fane. Hollis Purdy was still standing. Then say why, he said. Say why to my face, because I have got a boy that quit school in '80, and a mortgage I have carried 2 years longer than I ought to have. Because it was not a lie, Fane said. It was a price. Your wool is worth 3 cents less, and I paid 3 cents less. And because I said it once, in the fall of 1879, at Dorsey Sipey's counter, in front of 4 or 5 men, and I was laughed at, and I let it go. And it was not my 3 cents. He picked his hat back up off the desk. That is the whole of it, and it is not enough, and I know it is not enough. The room came apart then, for about 3 minutes, and out of the middle of it, from over by the west doors, came the question the whole of this story has been walking toward since the 22nd of March. Where did the pitch come from in the first place? I have been told there was a hush after that, but there was not. There was the ordinary noise of a lot of men all reaching the same conclusion at slightly different speeds, which is a sound like a wagon going over a plank bridge. And Dorsey Sipe stood up. He was 55 years old, and his ears were red, and his wife was standing 6 feet behind him, and he put one hand on the back of the bench in front of him to keep it steady. "It came in over my counter," he said. "I ordered it out of a jobbing house in Galveston. 611 buckets between 78 and this spring, and I have got the invoices in the store, and my name is on every one of them." "Dorsey." "My name is on it," Sipe said, louder. "That is the answer to the question, and there is not any more to the answer." Which was true. It was true in every particular. It was also a lie in the shape of a truth. Winnie Prather knew what it was going to cost him. She knew what it was going to cost Ada. And she knew the other thing, too. If she stood there by the south doors and said nothing at all, she got everything she had wanted since the 21st of June. For free. Out of the mouth of an honest man who was buying it for her. She thought about it for the length of about 4 breaths. I have wondered what went through her in those 4 breaths, and I have decided it was probably not very noble. Probably it was this. She was tired. She was 8 months along. Her back had not stopped hurting since September. Her hands were split across the knuckles, and had been since August. She had 41,000 pounds of other people's wool in her book, and $205 in fees she had not collected. She had been called one word since the 22nd of March by people she fed. And here was the whole of it. Free. All she had to do was stand still. She started walking up the middle of that floor. It is 90 feet from the south doors of the Marchbank wool house to the north end. She was 8 months on. It took her a while. The room noticed her about a third of the way up. By the time she was halfway, the whole building had gone quiet, and it was the first time all morning it had. Somebody moved a bench out of the aisle for her. She got to the front. She did not get up on the bale. "Sit down, Mr. Sipe," she said. "Mrs. Prather, sit down. You ordered it. You did not bring it here." She put the black order book on the desk beside Othofane's hat and opened it flat. "This is my husband's calling book for Dorsey Sipe's store, 1878 to 1880. There are 61 places in it. Every pen in this county, and the water it runs on, and the date he was there, and how many buckets he left." Nobody made a sound. 61 pens, she said. "That is all of you. That is every man in this room who was running sheep in 1879, and most of you can go home tonight and find the date in your own tally book, and it will match this one." She turned the book around so the front cover faced the room and held it up. "That is his hand," she said. "You know his hand. Half of you have got a letter from him in a drawer." Then she read them the line, and her voice did not go anywhere at all, which people remarked on for 30 years. "Will not wash off in the rain." She set the book down. "That is what he told you," she said. 61 times. He believed it. He was not selling you a thing he thought was bad. He was selling you a thing he thought was a bargain. It was 40 cents. It saved you a day's work twice a year. He was proud of it. And it has cost this county $420 a year for 4 years. $25,680. My husband brought the pitch into Tom Green County, and I have known it since the 21st of June, and I have not said it until right now. And you are entitled to know that too. The wool house was so quiet you could hear the north wind on the shingles. "I could have let Mr. Sipe have it," she said. "He was going to take it. He would have carried it the rest of his life and been decent about it, and I would have gone home with my husband's name clean." She looked around at them. "I am not going to do that. Not because I am better than that. Because I have spent 8 months being called a thing I am not, by people who never once opened me up to look. And I am not going to hand that to Ada Sipe on my way out the door." Then Ward Teague came up the floor from the west doors, carrying a 2-gallon bucket. He did not say anything for a second. He set it down on the desk beside the order book, and he turned it so the paper label was toward the room, and he stepped back from it. "That is mine," he said, "out of my own shed. There are 3 more where it came from. Ward, I bought 40 buckets of that in 1879, Teague said. Elias Prather never sold me one. I sent a boy in for them, because I heard from 3 men on the river that it was cheap and it would not wash off. I have marked 5,200 head with it every year since." He put his hands in his coat pockets. "So before this room settles on a name, I would like to see hands. Every man here that has marked a sheep with pitch." Nothing happened for about 2 seconds. Then Gid Rawls put his hand up and said, "Loud, since 79, and nobody made me." Then Hollis Purdy put his hand up. Then Marion Coy put his hand up, which surprised people because he did not run sheep, and he said, "I have sold it out of my own yard for 3 years to men that ran out." And then they went up all over that building. Not all at once, in 1s and 2s, the way a thing like that happens. It went on until there were better than 100 hands in the air in a room of 120 men. The ones who did not have a hand up were the 3 or 4 who had never owned a sheep in their lives. "Put them down," Ward Teague said. They put them down. "Now," he said, "anybody that wants to go on about who brought it, there he is." He nodded at the bucket. "Sold over Dorsey's counter. Carried out by a fellow we all liked. Bought by every one of us with our own money, because we all wanted the same thing, which was a mark we would not have to do twice. Not one of us asked what it did in Boston. Not one of us asked a single question in 4 years." He looked around. "That is on all of us. And it is going to stay on all of us. I am not going to stand in this building and watch 120 men put 4 years of their own carelessness on a man who cannot answer. Not in front of his wife. Not while she is standing right there." Hollis Purdy sat down slowly. "What do we do about it?" he said. And Winnie Prather said, "Now you are asking the right question." And the whole tone of that meeting changed inside of 5 seconds. And this is the part they should have written down. She laid it out standing at that desk for 40 minutes. Quit the pitch. Go back to rattle, which fades, which means marking twice a year instead of once, which costs a man with 1,000 head about 2 days of work and $4. Against 3 cents a pound, which on that same man is $180 a year. Skirt every fleece at the shearing. Take the tags and the belly and the breech off at the table and sack them separate. It does not cost a minute if the boy is trained, and it is worth 2 cents on the whole clip. Tie fleeces flesh side out always, with paper twine, and not with the sisal that sheds into the wool and shows up as vegetable matter in Boston. And sort. Grade the county's clip honestly into 4 grades, sack it in grades, mark the sacks, and consign it east on its own account with a manifest that a mill can read. "How much?" said a man from the back. "On 214,000 pounds, she said, "you are getting 16 cents and you are getting about $34,000. Quit the pitch and you get the 3 back. Sort it and you get 3.5 more. That is about $48,000 for the same sheep and the same year and the same grass." There was a noise in that room like a stove door opening. "And what does it cost us?" "1/2 cent a pound to me," she said, "and you wait until October to get paid." Somebody laughed once, high up on the press frame, and a man named Alvy Cade, who was not a bad man and who had 2 sections and a temper, said the thing that was in about 40 heads in that building. "And how do we know you can do it? Because Ward Teague says so?" "No," said Winnie Prather. "Because Otho Fane says so, or because he does not." The whole room turned around and looked at the desk. "Mr. Fane," she said, "you have bought wool in 9 states for 20 years. There is not another certified judgment in this county, and there is not going to be one today. "Will you take 9 fleeces off those wagons in the yard out of 9 different clips and grade them beside me, without either of us seeing the other's card?" Othofane looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up and took his coat off, which is the only time anybody in Tom Green County ever saw him do it. They set 2 tables together in the middle of that floor. Tobe Ansley and 3 others went out to the wagons and cut 9 fleeces out of 9 different sacks and carried them in and laid them in a row. And Coy numbered them 1 to 9 in chalk on the boards. Fane went first down the line. Then she did. Neither of them spoke. Each wrote a card and gave it to Marion Coy face down. It took 22 minutes. Coy read them out. They agreed on number 1. They agreed on 2 and 3. They agreed on 4, 5, and 6. They agreed on 7 and on 8. On number 9, Othofane had written fine clothing, good, and Winnie Prather had written tender will not hold, downgrade 2. "Well," said Fane. "Pull it," she said, "off the left shoulder down at the base. Both thumbs. And listen." He came around the table. 120 men leaned forward. Othofane of Sturgis & Co. took a lock of that wool between his thumbs and snapped it, and it went with no sound at all. And he stood there holding the 2 halves of it. "It is tender," he said. "It is tender. It came off an animal that went short in the winter. February," she said, "maybe 3 weeks of it." And Othofane turned around to a room of 120 people and said, in a clear voice, the exact opposite of the sentence he had said in that same building on the 22nd of March. 9 out of 9, he said, and the 9th one is hers, not mine. This woman is a better sorter than I am. She is a better sorter than any man Sturgis & Co. employs in the state of Texas, and if any of you had asked her in March instead of laughing, you would all be $6,420 richer than you are today. Nobody clapped. It was not that kind of room, and it was not that kind of county. What happened instead was that Marion Coy wrote out a paper, in his own hand, on the back of a manifest. It said that the undersigned engaged W. Prather to grade the 1883 clip at a half-cent a pound. He signed it first, then Ward Teague, then Gid Rawls, then Hollis Purdy. It went around that building for the better part of an hour. 61 men signed it. 61. She counted them that night, and she sat down when she got to the number, and she did not tell anybody why for 2 years. And then Ward Teague did the thing that this county talked about longer than any of the rest of it. He went out the north doors and across the yard to the east shed. Alone, he came back carrying her 12-foot slatted sorting table on his back. He carried it up the middle of that floor through 120 people. He set it down in the open space in the center of the wool house, where Othofane's desk had stood every spring since 1879. Then he went back for the stool. He set the stool behind the table, and he stood there with his hat in his hand, and he said, to the room and not to her, "That is where it goes." She sat down on it. She had been on her feet since 8 in the morning, and she was 8 months along, and I do not think there is any question that she needed to sit down. But she sat down there, in the middle of that building, in front of everybody who had ever called her the unfit widow, and she put her hands flat on the slats of her own table. And then the men went out to the yard and started bringing in the wool. 22 wagons. They brought it in sack by sack and set it down in a line beside that table until the line went 40 feet back toward the south doors, and then they stood along the walls and watched her open the first fleece. She worked until dark, and she graded 340 fleeces that afternoon. Othofane offered 19 cents for the whole county's holdover before he left, standing up in front of everybody, which was the highest price ever paid for wool in Marchbank up to that day. The county turned it down and consigned east. He took it well. He wrote the offer out and had Coy witness it so that everybody would know it had been made. He shook hands with 11 men. Then he asked Winnie Prather for her grade card off number 9 and put it in his pocketbook. "What will you tell Boston?" she said. "That I have entered into correspondence," said Otho Fawn. "There is one more thing from that day." The wool house was nearly empty. She took the blue chalk off the string at her wrist. There was one bale left standing in that building out of the sample lot. It had come back unsold. It was pitch-marked, off her own 900 sheep. She walked over to it and wrote one word on the end of it, in letters 8 inches high. Unfit. Marion Coy left it standing in the middle of his floor for 6 years. Men used to bring their boys in to look at it. Now, the name. I have been asked, when I have told this, exactly when Marchbank quit calling her the unfit widow, and I have to tell you that a town does not quit a thing like that on a Tuesday. It does not announce it. Nobody apologizes. What happens is quieter, and it is worse. The word just stops being useful. It stopped in about 3 weeks, and here is how you could tell. On the 14th of November, at 9 in the morning, there were 120 men in that building, and not one of them said her name out loud. By the 5th of December, she had 6 letters waiting at Saipe's store, and every one of them was addressed the same way. Mrs. W. Prather, Grader, care of the Marchbank wool house. Grader, that is the whole of the reversal, and it fits on an envelope. Tobe Ansley walked her out to the wagon that evening, on the 14th, in the dark, carrying her stool. "Ma'am, Tobe, can I ask you a thing?" "You can." "When you were coming up the floor," he said, "you had the book in your hand already, so you had decided before you got up there." "I decided the night before," she said, "sitting on my kitchen floor." "But you was going to let Mr. Sipe say it. For about half a minute you was." She stopped with her hand on the wagon. "Yes," she said. "For about half a minute I was." "Why did you not?" And she gave him an answer that Tobe Ansley repeated for the next 50 years, to his own boys, and to men in wool houses in 3 states, and I would not be able to tell you any of this without it. "Because a grade is one person's judgment all the way through," she said. "I have told 17 men that this year, and taken money for it. It does not hold if you take the good part and let somebody else carry the bad part. That is not a grade, Tobe. That is a lie with a number on it." Then she got up on the seat, which took her a minute, and drove 7 miles home in the dark. The horse knew the road. She paid the note on the 1st of December, 1882. She drove in at 10 in the morning with $412 in a knotted handkerchief. She counted it onto the bank's counter in coin and small bills, 1 piece at a time. It took her 6 minutes. There were 9 people in that room who had found a reason to be at the bank at 10 in the morning. Her fifth of the wineglass improvement came to $342. Her sorting fees came to $205. Her own clip, sorted, picked and consigned, made $189 more than Fane would have paid her for it. Not 1 cent of it came out of anybody's kindness. Ada Saipe was there. She had come with $38, which was what was left of a $95 subscription after the list got shorter, and she was standing by the door with the envelope in her hand, and no idea what to do with it. Winnie took her arm on the way out. "Ada, put it in the church stove fund," she said, "and come out Thursday, and I will show you how to tell 3" from 2½. Because, Ada, you have got 200 head and your husband cannot do it." Ada Sipe learned to sort. She was 50 years old, and she was slow at it, and she got good enough by 1885 to run a table on her own in the spring. The child was born on the 9th of December, 1882, 1 year to the day. Winnie noticed it, and she did not think it meant anything, and she said so, and she also never once forgot the date, which is the way people are. She named the child Winifred Roth Prather, for herself and for a German at Kerrville who hit her hand with a stick until she got it right. Ward Teague came out on the 11th with a load of firewood she had not ordered. He stacked it. He stood in the yard with his hat in his hands. He asked her a question. She told him to ask her again in April, when she could think. He asked her again in April. They were married at Marchbank on the 21st of April, 1883, on a Saturday, with 60 people there and no fuss made about any of it. She kept her own place at 6 Mile Draw. She kept her own 900 sheep and her own book. The paper Marion Coy wrote out on the back of a manifest stayed in her name and not in his. That was her doing. It was never once suggested otherwise. In the spring of 1883, Tom Green County sheared 217,000 pounds of wool. Not 1 pound of it was pitch-marked. It was skirted at the table. It was tied flesh side out with paper twine. It was sorted into 4 grades by Winnie Prather and 2 women she trained herself, sacked in grades, marked in blue chalk, weighed across Marion Coy's beam, and consigned east on its own account. It averaged 21.5 cents, that is $46,655. The same wool at Otho Fane's 16 cents would have brought $34,720. Spread that difference across 61 families, and it is a mortgage lifted here, a well sunk there. A boy who did not have to quit school in 1884 the way Hollis Purdy's had in 1880. Sturgis & Co. wrote to Marion Coy in the fall of 1883, asking whether the county would consider a direct contract. The county wrote back and said it would consider one, at the Concho standard, with no allowance of any kind, and that all questions of grade would be settled by their own sorter. Sturgis & Co. took it. Now let me give you the thesis of this thing, because I have been circling it for 2 hours, and it is not complicated. For 4 years, a county sold the whole of what it had, unsorted. It put the good and the bad and the sound and the tender all in one sack. It let one man who came through in the spring set one flat number on the lot. It never once opened anything up to look inside. And it lost $25,680 doing it, and it never knew, and it blamed the range and the breed and the weather. That county did the exact same thing to Winifred Prather. It looked at a big woman in a dirty apron who was widowed and carrying, and it set one flat number on the whole of her, sight unseen, run of the flock, and it called that number Unfit. It never opened her up to look either. The mill in Massachusetts was never wrong about the wool. It docked what deserved docking, and it paid 24 cents for what was worth 24 cents every time, without ever once caring who had grown it. And that is the whole difference between a market and a town. They called her the Unfit Widow. She graded 217,000 pounds in 1883, and every pound of it went east under her mark. And there is not a sheepman on the Concho who could have told you, 5 years later, what the word had ever been for.